Hello, I'm Tim, the Uncertified Pilot. I'm the creator, author of this free mod for Explain 11's default KingAir C90B, called the JongePionier mod version 9.0 already. I've been developing this mod for about a year, improving around 300 elements of the KingAir to make it fly much more realistic, including better systems, failures, sounds, new objects, the whole bunch, because I think that this KingAir really deserves a full-blown suite of realistic features, and so here it is. It's a free mod. If you're new to the mod, you can download it on the explain.org website. There might be a link here on the video, or you can find the link, the download link, in the video description below. Install it and enjoy flying this wonderful KingAir. And well, here it is. Looking from the outside in, a gorgeous repaint. I was inspired by the dark grayish livery of the KingAir C90 GTX. Also added winglets. Look at this beauty. I mean, it's much more sleek and modern, corporate. Material reflections here make it look really, really nice. Look at that glare. But yeah, the winglets look really, really cool as well. Also added a fuel truck. It just sits there, it doesn't do anything other than just, well, giving a sense that there's something going on the ramp. And I know you can request a fuel truck or a GPU card based on Explain's default mechanic. But if you have a custom airport and that stuff is not programmed into the custom airport, you won't see anything. So yeah, I like it to see a fuel truck when I'm parked and have my cabin door open. So here you go. When you're parked and you have your cabin door open, you see this fuel truck spawn. Which is nice. There's also a GPU card that you can request through a tiny red button in the cockpit that I will show you in just a sec, which spawns here at the right wing. And you actually need to go through real-world procedures to connect the GPU to your KingAir to have external power, which is really nice. I've also developed integrated 3D ice visualization, ice accumulation along the leading edges of both wings and also around the windshield when you're flying through icing conditions, based on Explain's default weather program, or I guess any kind of weather engine that you're using. I can show you, I guess. Let me bring up a developer tool here. What's the data ref for ice? I think it's this one. And let's say we're currently at Palm Springs International Airport, so it's quite warm outside. So the ice will melt off right away. You can see here there's icing. Gradually appears, but also gradually melts away. And I've also made working the ice service boots. So if you enable those boots, the ice breaks off, or well, if you're flying outside of icing conditions, like you see happening now, the ice just melts away. Same goes for the windshields, which is another data ref, and it's also programmed a little bit differently. So I guess I cannot show you. Anyways, the de-ice boots work, also follow the right kind of time schedule. I think it's a 10-second cycle, which is implemented as well. Windshield heaters also you can use now to actually melt away the snow or ice on the windows, which is nice. And especially because icing is a very severe, very relevant phenomenon during flight, I think it's very, very fun and very appropriate that we can see ice accumulate along the wing and along the windshield. So that is all part of this free mod. And again, if you're as excited about this mod as I am, because many hours and a lot of love and care went into making this mod, you can show your appreciation and support and encouragement to further develop this mod through FS Economy. I'm an active FS Economy pilot, also Pilot Edge user, but on FS Economy you can donate virtual dollars so I can enjoy FS Economy even more. So yeah, if you appreciate the work, show your support. Now, and looking from the outside in, you can see other stuff. Passengers, yes, passengers, and they dynamically spawn into the cabin based on your payload. And I've tailored that mechanic to FS Economy, of course. So when you have assigned yourself 4 passengers, for example, you'll actually see 4 passengers in the cabin once you started your flight, which is nice because again gives a sense that you're actually carrying passengers. Passengers also bring along their cargo that dynamically spawn into the cargo bay that I've also added to the cabin. Also additional seats here, like in the real world seat arrangement of the KingAir. There's also a seat over here, so passengers can spawn there. In total, 7 passengers, including the co-pilot seat. There are in total 8 seats, including the pilot. Don't know why in FS Economy, I believe, you can assign 11 passengers for the KingAir C90. Anyways, if you assign yourself 11 passengers, a maximum of 7 passengers will actually spawn in your cabin. Yeah, that's about it, I guess. Well, better textures, it looks great, sleeker, corporate, and yeah, this is a very quick and dirty showcase just to show you all of the different features rather than forcing you read through the 30-page version history of the 300 plus items that I've improved. A video is much more practical, so that's why, but I have no structure, so I'm just following my own excitement and focus here, so I apologize if I'm not complete and also when I'm a bit unstructured. Let's go into the cockpit. Also change the time of day so that we see a little bit more. Here we are in the cockpit, again inspired by the color scheme of the KingAir C90 GTX, black and white color scheme. To be honest, it's also been inspired by Steve Oknievo's TBM, which also has the black and white color scheme. It looks so nice. I love the color black. So yeah, here you go. It's a personal project, by the way, this mod. So I love flying the KingAir. It's very FPS friendly in Explain, but yeah, there are a lot of stuff is missing or doesn't work correctly. So there's the mod again to fix all of that. Yeah, I hope you enjoy this mod as much as I do. Yeah, and if we glance around the cockpit, especially if you're already familiar with the default KingAir, you see a lot of additional things, objects, features in the cockpit that I'm going to tell about in this mod, so you know what to do with them and get the real world POH of the C90. And yeah, I think, well, I'm no professional programmer by any means. I'm not a real world pilot. I'm not a real world KingAir pilot. I'm just a curious, uncertified pilot, sorry, interested in learning more about the KingAir and flying the KingAir in Explain. Yeah, I just did my best to improve as much as I can. Also, there were some real-world KingAir pilots that handed over manuals and all kinds of documentation to help me create this mod. So thank you again, guys, for that support. Much appreciated. And it's also on a side note, and then I will continue, as just a mere Explain user, mostly being frustrated about why some aircraft do not have all features or all switches working. I just one day decided to just delve into the Explain code and then discovered that Explain actually welcomes you to tinker with the code to a great extent. It's actually amazingly simple to just mod an aircraft. That said, it still took many hours to learn how to do 3D modeling and sound engineering and that kind of stuff, but it's really fun. And also, because of all of that coding, it's almost like a design-based learning project. I learned a lot about the systems of the KingAir, obviously, in order to program the hell out of it. So I'm really excited about this mod and learned a lot about the KingAir, and that makes me a better KingAir pilot, no doubt. So a lot of new stuff. So how are we going to structure this? Let's start from the left to the right, and I will just walk through all of the switches and see whatever comes to mind. Again, check out the version history PDF as part of the download, the 30-page document with everything, all the bolts and nuts that I tweaked or improved. I try to do my best to be as complete as possible in this video. Okay, well, first starting with the seat, you can see we have legs. We have a pilot body sitting here in the seat. That's because I'm exclusively flying in Explain in VR, in virtual reality. And having a pilot body here greatly enhances my sense of immersion being in the cockpit. So there you go. I created this pilot body. It dynamically spawns and despawns based on your viewpoint, which is nice. Yeah, that's also on the note of VR. All of the buttons and levers and switches are now fully VR compatible, which is not the case with the default KingAir. For example, I believe the transfer switch here doesn't work in VR and all kinds of stuff, which is now fixed. I've also added additional manipulators. So for example, now you have a manipulator to control both propeller levers at the same time. Same for the condition levers, which is very handy during climb out. if you do not own any hardware to do this, of course, but in VR I use my controllers. So yeah, it's quite handy to do that simultaneously. And some general remarks as well. I don't know if you've noticed already, I didn't when I started, is that some switches have white circles around them and others don't. That obviously has some functional meaning. Well, what? Well, the meaning is that every switch that has a white circle around it, that means that that underlying system is also connected to the battery, which helps when you have engine out or electrical system problems, you know what systems you can rely on. Also, there are some interesting redundancy designs here. For example, the pitot heat. So we've got two pitot tubes in the KingAir. Well, one is connected to the battery, other on generator power. So some redundancy built in for safety measures, which is interesting. Yeah, so I corrected all of those white circles throughout the cockpit, corresponding to the right electrical wiring of all the systems, so you can play with that as well in emergency procedures. And well, the same I did with the fuel panel, added circles, those white circles around the switches. I believe that some, if not all, of these underlying systems are hot wired to the battery. So the battery switch is not required to be flipped on in the on position for the fuel boost pumps to work, for example. As far as the mechanic goes of the fuel panel here and the fuel systems, there was an update a year ago by the Explain team that updated the KingAir on this front, which was an excellent update. So I believe I haven't changed anything or improved or needed to improve anything on the fuel panel front, so that worked just great. Also with the firewall switches here and all the corresponding annunciators in the annunciator panel works excellent, so that's good. Oh yeah, Avitap, I see Avitap here. It's stowable now, so you can from version 8.2 to version 9 now, you can click it or mount it on your yoke if you like to. Sometimes during my flights I do not need the Avitap tablet to be on my yoke, so well, now you have the choice to dismount it if you like. And yeah, with the view panel it didn't change anything. On that note, let's just start at the back here. Again guys, sorry for the unstructured video case. This is just a quick and dirty showcase. We've got oxygen masks. We also got first things first, we got a cockpit door. Not a biggie, but I like the cockpit door, so I made it. Here you go. We've got oxygen masks. Yeah, those are interactive. You can actually put those on and it's connected to an oxygen tank. There's also an oxygen gauge here to the right that shows you the depletion of oxygen over time. I've also rewritten the hypoxia effects based on the POH of the KingAir to make those much more realistic. What's also interesting is that when you put on the oxygen mask, your regular virtual in-explain mic doesn't work. You need to flip this switch, the mic switch, to enable the mic in the mask, or the other way around. If you flip this switch without having put on the oxygen mask, your regular virtual explain mic doesn't work, which is very relevant and very fun for our pilot edge users like me. When you're flying and you have an emergency, you need to put on the oxygen mask on, you need to switch this switch, like in the real world, to be able to talk to ADC, because otherwise they won't hear you because you have this mask covered your face. Which is nice. We also got a fire extinguisher to combat smoke. Just click it, which is interesting. Explain can trigger those smoke effects. I think I also built some failures in terms of engine fires. If you have your cabin vents open and stuff and smoke comes into the cockpit, you can use the fire extinguisher as many times as you like to combat that smoke. Small thing, but it's nice. Okay, so behind pilot body, fuel panel, yeah, that's okay. Then let's start with power, external power, battery power, but we have a third source of power now, which is interesting. Never heard about it before, but apparently it exists. It's the ground communication power. It is power, standby power in the aircraft to only power the communication, the COM1 radio stack to grab your IFR clearance. Nothing else works. You don't need to have to switch on the avionics, so you can click it. And if you go to the COM1 stack, you have power. Only there you have power, which is nice. I never used it, but just for the sake, just for the love of the KingAir, I created this, and I hope you appreciate that. Took a lot of programming and a lot of tweaking. Anyways, The other way, of course, is just putting on the battery power. Now, as you see, if we do that, a lot of other stuff has been improved according to the real-world operation of the KingAir. The master warning and master caution lights now blink like they do in the real world. Also, I've corrected all of the coupling between the master warning annunciators and the master caution annunciators with these buttons. I've also completed those, so if I use this test, you can see all kinds of, well, if you're familiar with the default KingAir, you see there are a lot of improvements there, which is really, really nice. Also, these systems underlying all of the annunciators have been worked and improved, have been worked on and improved. Yeah, by the way, I'm at my Mac computer and my actual beefy FS computer is next to me, so I'm just using the mouse here to get around explaining doing this video. Yeah, okay, so that's battery. What I also created is a workable Voltmeter Bus Selector here at the top, which is now working, which is really, really nice. So you can see if you actually have voltage for the various electrical systems or sources you have in the KingAir, including the external source. Now, one current limitation of this mod, or I guess the default KingAir, is that the textures are so poor. Perhaps it also helps with the FPS, but practically speaking, I've added a few text labels here like in the real world, but you cannot read them because this resolution is very, very poor. Perhaps I will solve this in the next version update of the mod, but just by heart, the first setting is external power voltage, then sender, left generator, right generator, the triple bus, and the battery, I think. Yeah, we can go to the battery and you can see 24 volts, which is nice. Yeah, so that's the battery, that's power, but we also have external power. Now, with the default KingAir, you can just simply switch the external power switch and suddenly, magically, you have external power. Well, with this mod, it's a bit different. It's a bit more realistic. Nothing happens with the external power until you have requested a GPU card, which you now can. To the left of the external power switch, if you look closely, you can see a red button over here. If you press it, a GPU card spawns to the right side of the wing, which is really, really nice. And also in correspondence, in accordance with real-world operations, the GPU guy or gal now connects a GPU power cable into the KingAir, and the KingAir is telling us that the power cable is connected, but we're not really sourcing any power from the GPU, and that's what the external power switch does. So if we now switch the external power switch, there you go, we've got external power, and we can verify now with the Voltmeter Bus Selector. You can see we now have about 28 volts, which is good. I will turn the external power off here because it makes an annoying noise. Just for the sake of this video, I will turn it off. Yeah, then we got the mic. I already talked about that with the oxygen mask, Avionics. Nothing special about that front, I believe. We got the inverters. We've got 2 inverters. So if you put those on now, also the both of them show up here at the inverter voltage or voltmeter. So again, a lot of systems in the KingAir are powered by DC power, but some systems are reliant on AC power. So we need an inverter to do that, primarily for the Autopilot. Somehow the Autopilot in the KingAir relies on AC power. So it's very important, if you want to use your Autopilot during flight, that you either have enabled number 1 or number 2 inverter. Real procedures prescribe that you intermittently use number 1 and number 2 inverter for every flight, but it needs to be set on for the Autopilot to work. And here you can also see that we have a AC voltage. Also interesting is that in the real world there is a button here which I now created for the mod, as part of the mod, where you can click and you see the amperage of the AC devices, connected devices. This is just a gimmick. This is not really working. AC voltage or amperage is not simulated and explained, so this is just a static dummy kind of value here. Or, well, there is some interaction here, I believe, whether you have turned on the Autopilot or not. Well, anyways, that's what this button is for. Switch back to voltage. Anything else about the inverters? I guess not. Let's move to the right here then. These are the auto ignition switches. Nothing I improved on that front, I believe. But again, look at the version history PDF if you really want to know everything that I've changed. Have a look. To the bottom, the engine NTI. So this has nothing to do with heating at all. These are the inertial separators that are inside the inlets of the engine. Somewhere around here to prevent any FOD, any objects, dirt, stones, ice to get into the combustion chamber of the engines and potentially damaging the turbines and stuff. So there's a flap, kind of like a back door that opens up that allows the stuff, the dirt, the FOD to exit the engine before it's sucked into the combustion chamber, which is very important. And I've implement all kinds of failures associated with that. According to the POH, you always need to have activated the engine NTIs, the inertial separators, during ground operation. If you don't, you run the risk of damaging your engines now. Very unlikely, but it can happen. What's also implemented are the standby actuators of the inertial separators, these buttons here. So the engine NTIs or the inertial separators can fail now. If they do, you can try to use the standby actuators to make them work. You can see on the annunciator panel whether you have activated the inertial separators. That's about that, I guess. Let's move to the left here. We got the generator switches. These now have, like in the real world, 3 positions. The default KingAir already mentions that there's a generator reset position, but in the default KingAir, that position is not actually there, but now it is. Which means that if you have started your engines and like to use generator power, it's not enough to just switch them on. You need to first pull them up to the generator reset position and let go. And then you'll see that you have generator power, like with real world operation. Small things, but I think it's cool. Again, love and care for the KingAir. Let's see, battery power, nothing else I need to say about that, I guess. Then we got the Gentile switches and the bus sense reset switches now also work. Has to do with electrical failures, where, for example, you have a high voltage in your systems, and usually by default, if everything is okay, all of these systems are cross-tied, the battery and the generator power. But if there is high voltage in some of the buses or some of the systems, the KingAir automatically self-protects itself and opens all of the bus relays. And in that case, this switch automatically goes down, and it doesn't go up until you first reset the bus sensors, like it is described in the POH, which now also works. So also a great tip, get your hands on the actual real-world POH of the KingAir, because it's really study level now. So I'm not going into all of the underlying procedures. I'm just describing the mod so you have a head start. But big tip, get your hands on a POH. Which is also always fun to do, or obviously to study your favorite aircraft. Then we get the ignition start. Nothing special there, other than that if, like is described in POH, if you keep the starters on longer than 30 seconds or so, you actually damage the starters and they fail. So be quick about it, or be appropriate about it, I guess. You can also motor the engine, so without using the ignition as well, you can just motor the engine to cool down the engines, which is also important. So if you fly the KingAir and shut down the KingAir, the engines obviously are still warm. If you then just right away start up the engines again, you run the risk of a hot start. So first you need to motor the both engines for them to cool down, and then you don't run the risk of a hard start. Like is described in the POH, now also works now with the default KingAir. Isn't it great? I mean, and also it's hard to put into words how much satisfaction it gives to be the one having developed the mod. I mean, flying your own modded aircraft is so cool, guys. And it's not that difficult at all. I'm considering making some developer video tutorial case where I can just show you how I did what I did with the KingAir, because it's not rocket science at all, and it's much fun. You learn a bit about programming and 3D modeling and Photoshop. Anyways, getting off track here. Then we got the parking brake lever. So what I've done is that the parking brake lever now is decoupled from the toe brakes. Usually in Explain, if you just tap the toe brakes, the parking brake automatically releases, which is not realistic. Now you actually need to manually push and pull the parking brake lever to do that. In real world, it's a bit more sophisticated though, but I got all kinds of issues reported by users in previous versions, so I made it a little bit more simplistic. So this is it. Then we got the auto feather, works as advertised. Also the propeller test, governor test works. Yeah, we got the pilot air, defrost air, and the cabin air, and the co-pilot air vents, which only work if we got bleed air now. So the environmental system of the KingAir has also been improved. All kinds of dependencies now are written into the code, which is nice. But also I've implemented separate airflow sounds for each of the different air vents. So if you enable the pilot air and obviously the systems are on, you can actually hear coming that pilot air from a specific position. I believe the air is coming from the left side here, left side panel here of the pilot seat. You can actually hear the airflow. Same goes for all of the other levers, cabin air or airflow levers. Also interesting for the defrost, talking about icing, if you open up the defrost air, I believe it's warm air coming here somewhere around the dashboard, the glare shield, it actually accelerates the melting of the windshield icing together with your windshield heaters. Yeah, that also works. It's small things, but exciting stuff, I think. All right. Also forgot about the EVIS auxiliary power. So apparently, for example, during gear operation, the voltage might drop because this is a heavy-duty kind of thing, and the EVIS might show some blinking or showing that it hasn't got full power to function. And so we've got a auxiliary standby power battery specifically for the EVIS to provide power when there is no power or less power for the EVIS, which now also works. Also the corresponding alarm stuff works. Let me see if I can quickly show you. Turn on the EVIS power system. I guess, yeah, you can silence the thing, which is really nice. So all of that stuff works now. You'll never use this, I guess, but it's interesting. Let me see. Yeah. So we got the EVIS, we got the timer. Anything else? Yeah, well, we can go on top here. Airspeed. So we also got flaps over speeds. We got gear over speeds. So really memorize those V speeds to treat your KingAir properly, because those now actually have an effect on your airframe. Also the layout of the EVIS, of the EHSI and the AEADI are corrected for the most part. There's still some stuff that I'm working on, but it's a great improvement, I think. Also the decision height callouts and mechanic now works. I believe there's also a test button over here.
Minimums.
Here, minimums, call out, all of that stuff now works. Also enunciators flashing in the screen when you're at decision height or somewhere around decision height. During your approach, which is nice. Also some customizations, personal customizations. One thing that I was a bit frustrated about is that when I set my IAS mode during autopilot operation, I cannot see what airspeed I've actually set. So what I've done is, if you go into airspeed mode, you now see the current set airspeed in the left down corner. Also counts for the vertical speed, by the way. If you in vertical speed mode, you see the vertical speed set here, or I believe it's here. And you can use the rocker switch on the pedestal to change the speed, which is interesting. Big tip though, use the climb or descend modes because those are a bit more sophisticated and they automatically change the speed based on your altitude. But read the POH. Okie doke. Well, I can also show you, well, why not? The weather radar. Let's go stormy. And let's move to the weather radar mode and also zoom out. There you go. Here you see the weather radar, and there are some interesting effects here because the weather radar automatically, it's a bit of a visual gimmick effect. So you can see that the brightness of the of the weather radar imagery pulsates as though we are actually transmitting radar beams. Of course, this is just a NextRed data link kind of weather depiction, which is not realistic. Anyways, I try to make it look a little bit more like we're actually beaming out stuff and get a sense of what the weather is doing. So that works as well. Yeah, let me change the weather. Oh, that's not the button that I was looking for. Let me change back the weather to Palm Springs weather. Yeah, I also changed some icons here for the sake of clarity. Anything else about the EFIS? Well, you can put it on. Yeah, we got some redundancy. We got some interesting other systems here. We got a composite or revisionary mode to use for the EFIS. The EFIS can fail on the base of X-Plane's own failure system. Also, big recommendation for flying the KingAir or any aircraft in X-Plane: always fly with failures enabled. Even though the failures are very unlikely to occur, you can set those customized the frequency of failures. Just the mere sense that you know that something could fail gives full meaning to all of the procedures and checks you would do in the real world to fly the KingAir in this case. So the mod has its own failure systems. If you mistreat it, it will treat you badly. But also flying with the X-Plane failures enabled is very much fun. And well, again, brings the KingAir to life in my opinion. So we got a revisionary mode. The EFIS can fail, and if it fails, the revisionary mode actually grabs flight information from the co-pilot side to still make the EFIS work. So if the EFIS fails, you can now do that and see if that solves the problem. We also have a test function here in the right corner. I'm not sure what it does in the real world. I guess there are some enunciations then on the EFIS. I have no information on that at version 9 at least. So now if you press it, you see that the EFIS actually blinks. If it blinks, it blips, you know that it's still working. If it doesn't blink when you hit this button, then something is up and the EFIS might be failed and you can troubleshoot further. So that's how I implemented here. Every button or switch thing needed to work, so here you go. That's for the EFIS. Anything else here? No, not really. Prop sync all works. Let's move to the right here in the sub panel. Landing lights. Oh yeah, we got icing lights, which is nice. They were already implemented in the default KingAir, but you couldn't see them. They were very, very small, so I made them much more big and bright, so they are actually functional. So if we go into nighttime, you can see them bright. Well, it seems like the wing is not illuminated, but it is. Especially when you see ice, white ice, it very clearly reflects light back. And so you can see the ice forming appear or not appear. So same goes for the other wing, which is very, very functional, of course. Let's go back to daytime. Can we get a, yeah, something like this. Anything else about the lights? I guess not. We got the windshield heaters, those work. Also, if you put those on, yeah, you melt the ice if it's accumulated here in the corner. Again, if you want to see the windshield icing, it's not enough just to mess around with the data refs, because I did some other coding. Just set severe snow icing in the weather settings, just below freezing point, and just watch and see, and you'll see the ice grow on the wings and also here on the windshields. If you turn on the windshield heaters, it melts away. If you put on the defrost air, if your engine is running and you have bleed air, then it melts even faster. Also interesting, like described in the POH, if you put on your window heaters, it interferes. There's some electrical magnetic field surrounding the windows because of that windshield heating and electricity going on. And it shows some erratic movements of the magnetic compass, and you will see that it's part of the mod as well, which is interesting. Not really that functional, I guess, but it is interesting. It's nice. Again, love and care for the KingAir. We got the prop heat, which is nice. Also, if you put on the prop heat and the pitot heaters during ground operation for too long, they burn and die and fail on you. So only put on this stuff when you have icing conditions, or if you talk about normal operations, you need to put on these 5 different heaters, the big 5, for every flight just before takeoff. But if you keep them on for too long and there's no cooling of airflow, they break. So like described in the POH. So that is implemented as well. The fuel vent heaters now actually work. So if you've got severe icing and you haven't put on the fuel vent heaters, you run the risk of blocking the fuel vents and interesting stuff happens. So put those on. We've got the service D boots now also work if we have bleed air, if we have running engines and we got bleed air power. You can put this switch up or down depending on what kind of functionality you need. You'll also see a quick dip in the pressure and the suction gauge to verify that the boots are actually working. I haven't yet animated the boots themselves, so you don't see them inflate, but this is another way just to check whether the boots are working. You can see a quick dip in pressure, quite significant though to make it a little bit more pronounced, but there you go, and it breaks off, almost completely breaks off the icing, which is good. Again, if you see icing accumulate on the wings or on the windshield, it deteriorates your flight performance. You might stall a lot more sooner, so deal with the ice. Then we got some cool stuff. It's not that relevant and it's just for practice sake, I guess. But all of the gear systems now work. And not only that, I made the gear transition light work, inspired by Airfall Labs' KingAir 350. I love that spill light of the gear lever. I don't know if you've seen it, but I always wanted to see that spill light with the default KingAir as well. So I made it. A lot of hours went into this, so I hope you appreciate this as well. We have power. Yeah, let's go into nighttime so I can really show you the effects. There you go, with the gear horn, as you can see, an actual spill light. Doesn't it look great? I think so. Also, as you can see, as part of the mod, you can now put up the lever, which was not possible with the default KingAir. And automatically, obviously, the KingAir reminds you that this is not a good setting. Luckily, though, there are squat sensors at the gear that sense whether there's actually weight on the wheels, that you are on the ground. And in that case, the gear lever doesn't actually actuate the retraction or extension of the gear. However, you can imagine that there's a scenario where you take off and you put the gear lever up and unfortunately the gear doesn't come up and then you need to troubleshoot, right? Now in that case, it could be the case that the squat sensors are not working properly and they still think that you're on the ground, and so you can put up the gear lever but the wheels don't actually retract, and so you can temporarily manually disable the squat sensors that we can do now as well. So yeah, that might be a nice finish of this video. We're on the ground, we retract the gear and then hit this button and you'll see that the gear will collapse and we will all die in fire. So that's about the ending of this video. Also, the landing gear relay works. Also, oh, sorry, I'm too excited here. I'm messing around with my microphone. Tim, focus. The landing gear relay breaker now works. So this is a inverted kind of scenario to the one that I just explained, where you have successfully retracted your gear and you're approaching your airfield, your destination, and you put down the gear lever and the gear doesn't come down. Now we have hydraulic manual way to actually extend the gear. So you hit this button and that time around you can move forward in your seat, and on the ground, if you move forward enough, the pilot body disappears. You can see a landing gear lever, the red handle, and you can pull and push it 3 times to fully extend the gear. It works. Great practice, by the way. It was actually quite hard to do this while flying. As you can see, you do not have, if you have the autopilot on, it's not that difficult, but if you're hand flying, well, it's interesting. Yeah, go practice that. Well, in the real world, you need to have put in a lot more force, and I guess you need to pump around 10 times or so. I made it a little bit easier, a little bit more easy for us. It's only 3 times to fully extend the gear, but that stuff works. Now, so go check it out. We also got the gear transition light test button there. We can also test the green lights here by pressing on these lights, annunciator lights. We can also test the hydraulic fluid sensor, the hydraulic pressure of the gear system and stuff. So if you press it, you can see whether it's actually working. If it is filled, you won't see that annunciator. Cool stuff. Then let's move upwards. Well, the engines are also much more sophisticated. So hot starts, wet starts, hung starts are all nicely coded, I think. Also, for example, in relation to restarting your engines, running the risk of a hot start and that kind of stuff. Also, the ITT values and the torque dynamically changes while you're taking off, according to the charts, which is nice. And also fuel flow and that stuff has been corrected. So it's pretty much exactly on the money in terms of the performance tables in the POH, which is also very good for planning. Anything else about the engines? Well, engine fires, they can seize up, they can do all kinds of weird stuff. Anything else on that front? I guess not. Then let's move on to the pedestal. So again, some nice textures here. I don't know if you can see. I can change the sunlight so I can show you. Yeah, just here. Some textures here added. The go around button is actually there, and the gear horn silencer is actually there. I guess no one's actually going to click here, but there are click spots there. You just need to program it. Also, a good note, for this whole mod to work, I needed to change a few keybinds. And so if you're used with your regular user profile, keybind profile, and you flip on the Avionics switch, for example, it doesn't work with the mod. So check the explain.org download page of this mod, where I've listed the 4 or 5, I don't know, different keybinds, and you just need to set a different profile for the KingAir for it to work. Otherwise, I couldn't get it to work like it should. So you know. Also added sounds for the detent here. Well, the engines are off at the moment, but if they are running, we can get into in reverse, and you can actually hear a sound here, the detent sound, which is nice if you're only focused on looking outside. In my case, flying in VR, it's nice to have that feedback, that sound feedback. The additional manipulators, I already mentioned those. Let's go to the pedestal. Can I put some light there? Yep, here we go. Flaps, well, they can overspeed. They also have good timings now, so it takes a lot more time to fully extend. This is all still as default, I think. Well, I changed some of these systems here. I already showed you with the weather radar, also with the compass mode, HSI mode, this mode that I really love. I also increased the font size of the numbers because in VR with the Oculus Rift S I couldn't read those, so I made them a little bit bigger. And the layout changed. Oh yeah, I also added a heading bug, which is custom. This is not in the real world playing, but I got so frustrated of looking down and using this heading bug selector that I thought, well, what the heck, I'm the modder here. It's my own KingAir. I want my own heading bug here. So now you can change the heading bug like so. Well, the test button works. There's stuff here that doesn't yet work that I'm still working on, but again, it's almost fully complete. Also, the decision height you can now set here, and it gives the proper enunciators and callouts, which is really nice and very handy. Autopilot works as advertised. Yeah, I already told you that the IAS indication now appears here on the screen, which is also customized, not in the real world. That's not the case, but here for the mod it does. You can test the autopilot, the enunciators, which also already worked, I guess, with the default airplane. That's about it for this part. Well, the revisionary system, I told you. The testing, I already told you. You can dump the cabin pressure. So yeah, the pressurization system has been rewritten and improved. So for example, if you have your cabin door open while flying, yeah, you won't see any cabin pressurization, obviously. Also goes for the cabin temperature, by the way. It equalizes with the outside air temperature if you keep your cabin door open. You need your bleed air, of course, for the pressurization system to work. And there were some other bugs there that I fixed, I guess. So you can see that that is actually working like it should. Okay, that's the pedestal, and nothing else I need to explain on this front, I guess. So let's move to the main center panel here, the avionics. Nothing I really changed on this front. Well, the auto communication switch, I guess, works also. So based on what microphone you set, the switch flips here. I guess in the real world, the switch doesn't actually physically flip, just the underlying system enables, but that's something that I can do, but didn't take the time yet to implement. I also customized 2 buttons because those had no meaning at all in sim world for the explain. So here we got a Pilot Edge connect and disconnect button. Again, I'm flying in VR and I don't like to get out of VR, get to Pilot Edge, connect, disconnect. I just rather do that from within the cockpit, and now you can. If you flip the switch upwards, you automatically connect to Pilot Edge or disconnect. There's also some feedback on whether you have a live connection. For Pilot Edge, it's the COM1 device, so you'll see a www enunciation here telling you have a live connection. While you're flying on Pilot Edge and that enunciator is not there, you know you are not live on Pilot Edge anymore in case of a radio comm failure scenario issue. Also, if you transmit on Pilot Edge or receive transmissions on Pilot Edge, the corresponding enunciators appear, which is also quite handy. So if you push the torque button, you'll see a TX enunciator light up. Also counts for the also is applied to the COM2 radio if you're using the COM2 radio to transmit or receive, which is nice. Same goes for the FS economy side of things. You can connect to FS economy by pulling up that switch or disconnect. But however, FS economy is a little bit more complex, a little bit more sophisticated, because only connecting to FS economy doesn't start your flight. So you can only connect to FS economy by pulling up the switch. You can start, first, if you do that, you'll see that at the transponder you see feedback. The www enunciator then flashes once you connect to FS economy, telling you you're connected to FS economy, but your flight hasn't started yet. Also in that state, if you have put on your parking brakes and you're parked, there's also a end enunciator there telling you that you can also finish the flight. That's only there if you obviously have started your flight already. Never mind. So you switch on the FS economy, you connect to FS economy, there's a WW blinking telling you you've not started your flight. Well, how do you start your flight? By closing the cabin door. If you close the cabin door, automatically you start your flight, and if you have a live connection, and your passengers spawn or despawn based on your particular assignment. And then you'll see that the flashing www enunciator in the transponder becomes a steady light telling you you've got a stable live flight connection. And I believe then you will see a steady end enunciator as well if you're still parked, telling you that you can also now end the flight if you like. Cool stuff, I think. The interphone and stuff, I guess, also works, I guess, only for the Pilot Edge pilots. Have a look at the version history PDF to really get into the details of this. Anything else I need to say? Well, we got different channels for the DME that works. Also, we got working altimeter encoders that are connected to the transponder, so the transponder can fail, and it might be due to a failing encoder transmitting in mode C your altitude. So if during troubleshooting, you can try using a different encoder. Sometimes it works, it solves the problem, sometimes it doesn't. This is nice. Also, the brightness mechanic of the radio stack now works, or it already worked, but if you turn it all the way to the right, full brightness, now you go into a auto ambient light mode. So then the brightness of the different radio stacks is adjusted based on the lighting in the cockpit, like it does in the real world. And there are sensors here in the devices that can do that, and so that works as well. Then we got the radio stacks. My gosh, this is really a quick and dirty, very quick showcase. I hope you can follow up, or otherwise just review the video many times, of course. The storage function now, all of these buttons now also work with each and every radio stack. So you can store one frequency, the standby frequency, into memory if you press this button. In the real world, you can do about 6, I think, which is, well, a bit exaggerated, I guess. Only for pilots flying all the times in the same area, they might program all of those frequencies. In this case, with the mod, at least for version 9.0, you only can store one frequency in memory. And you can see that once we hit the stow button, the storage button, you can see, or the store button, you can see the memory enunciator there. And if we change the standby frequency and then push down the this flip switch into memory mode, it loads from memory the stored frequency, which is nice. We can also test each and every radio stack. Also interesting, there are diagnostic codes built into this each and every radio stack telling the pilot whether you actually have a failed or a working or whatever state of the radio stack. I've only made 2 diagnostic codes. The one code tells you that it's actually working is when it's a 6, it tells you that it's failed. So if you're doubting whether your system is still working, especially when you're flying on pilot edge and ATC doesn't hear you or there's some trouble, you can test whether your comm radio has failed or not, like in the real world. There's also a active button somewhere tucked away underneath here, which allows you to directly change the active frequency if you like. I don't, but you can. Also, this annunciator I've changed. This should be ACT. I changed it to RX, so this annunciator lights up whenever you receive transmissions, at least when you're flying on pilot edge. Some customizations just to benefit my own experience of flying this mod. Deal with it. Okay, same goes for all of the other radio stacks and the transponder. You can also pre-select. It's a little bit different for the transponder. The button below here, you can store a preset transponder code and load it into memory again. Enjoy. Also now the GPS doesn't go on automatically when you put on power in avionics. You need to manually turn on the GPSs, and the button to do that, or the turning knob, is this C switch. So you turn it to the right and there you go. I really like turning switches, flipping switches, turning knobs and that kind of stuff. So that's why I made the KingAir go completely cold and dark when you load it in X-Plane, and you need to manually set the GPS. You can also turn those off if you like to fly with partial panels, which is also interesting for practice, I guess, but that works. There's also a crossfill functionality. So if you put the upper, so there already is a crossfill functionality, right, in X-Plane's G and S's, but it's a manual once per click kind of crossfill. And rather what I would like to see is that both devices are continually connecting, continually cross-filling the flight plan, so I can use the upper GPS as my map and the below one for the flight plan. That now also works when you put this one in this the upper GNS GPS into this map mode, and you use the flight plan mode here beneath. If you turn this rotating knob all the way to the right, you can see it automatically starts to cross-fill, and so all the changes you do here will also appear or cross-fill at the top. Also resolve some other issues here with the clicking sound, which is also gone. So that's nice, very practical also. Anything else about the radios, transponders? I guess not, at least as far as I know. Again, take a look at the version history PDF to know about every single thing that I've changed or corrected. The environmental system, well, also rewritten. I already told you a little bit about it. Anything else that I can add? Well, if the bleed air is not on, it doesn't work. The heater and stuff, also the amperages and so are corrected. So you can also, I believe, in a battery only configuration, if you turn everything on, the window heat, the prop heat, the electrical heater, the air conditioning, you draw so many amps that I think the system cannot handle it. There's also this switch is now also spring loaded, the electrical heater. So like it's described in the POH, once you take off and you're off the ground, this switch automatically flips back to normal position, because otherwise the heater doesn't or the system cannot handle that much of an electrical power to make it all work. But if you do, then you get the whole Gentile stuff and the bus relays open, and you can see all kinds of interesting stuff happen. Yeah, that works. Well, on the Copilot side, not a lot has changed. These are just basic gauges. I already told you about the gyro suction gauge and the pressure gauge that work, and also indicate whether the de-ice boots work. We've got oxygen here, that works. Circuit breaker panels do not work. I'm not really interested in modeling that. There should be an alternate static air switch here, which might be part of the next version of the mod. And again, if you're as excited about me, guys, about this mod, I mean, there are many hours put into this and a lot of frustration. I mean, I'm no professional programmer at all. I'm just a mere explain user. I'm not a real pilot or real world KingAir pilot. So just through, or based on mere curiosity, being an uncertified developer, I made this mod, and while making it, learning about explain and developing. So yeah, any appreciation for the work is welcomed, particularly through FS Economy with some donations to encourage me continuing developing this mod. Or here, the alternate static air should be here, I guess. I'm not quite sure. Still work to do. Then on the top we got the overhead panel, so we got some additional buttons here as well. Well, the Voltmeter Bus Selector I already told you about. We also have a master light switch. Apparently there is one, which enables or disables all of these corresponding or on the same row, these panel lights. So yeah, well, it's not really that special. This needs to be flipped on for these to work. Also, we got an instrument emergency light switch. So there's a standby battery that only powers these two floodlights, the panel floodlight and the overhead floodlight, when you enter or exit the cabin at night or the cockpit. That now also works. I also corrected some of the lighting. Well, let me show you either way. Let's put on the dashboard lights. It looks, it's a bit corrected also with the default KingAir. There was a weird light bulb connected with the yoke. So if you turn the yoke, you will see a light move alongside the dashboard, which was weird, which is also fixed. Also some other light soaring. I'm Dutch, guys. My English vocabulary is not that great. There's some kind of light there in somewhere around the KingAir that was doing nothing. So all kinds of buggy things have been improved. Also, the lighting of the panel has been optimized. The ice lights I already told you about. The wing ice lights now work. Yeah, that's, I think, all about the lights, I guess. And I guess also the entire review, or most of it at least, concerning the KingAir. Is there anything else that I forgot about? No, I guess we talked about all the systems. Well, again, recommendation, get your hands on the POH, because obviously I based the mod on the POH and a lot of other documentation that's been sent to me by real-world KingAir pilots. So yeah, it makes this KingAir a lot more study level, at least I hope. And yeah, go fly it, go download the mod, enjoy, leave your comments, let me know if there are any bugs, and I'll work on version 10 in a while. Meanwhile, I'm just going to enjoy flying the KingAir once again. Again, it takes a lot of love and care and time to create this mod, so now it's time to just enjoy the work and get around Pilot Edge and do my sky ratings and all of the alphabet challenges and all of the cool stuff that Pilot Edge offers. So that's what I'm going to do first. Now, on that note, I already promised, let's go out with a bang with this video. We retract the gear horn goes off like, oh my gosh, you shouldn't do this, but nothing happens because the squat sensors at the gear prevent us from actually retracting the gear, but we can disable the sensors. And on that note, thank you for your attention, thank you for your interest in the mod. Again, I hope you will download this and enjoy it as much as I do. Show your support on FS Economy, and I hope to see you guys very, very soon.